Chair. Will you consider adding social class to the list of those groups that need redressed representation?
That's a really good point. I'm sure the Commission will look into that. I mean, the Commission, not me, 15 independent members, the two deputy mayors, will look into this. We're working on terms of reference, but I'll make sure that your suggestion is passed on to those working on terms of reference.
Will the Commission that will be looking into diversity be politically diverse itself?
I certainly hope so. It's really important we properly reflect our city's diversity, and that includes the point you referred to in relation to politics as well.
Along with adding to the public domain, will it consider removing monuments from it? And who will decide what criteria for considering removal? Who will decide what those criteria will be?
Well, I think this was your original question, Senator Boff, that I sought to respond to. None of this has been worked out because it's really important to take on board various views. You'll have strong views, I'm sure. Please feel free to feed in your views to the two deputy mayors, but also to the independent members once they've been appointed. There'll be an open advertising process for the vacancies. You can apply to be one of those members, but I'm sure others will as well. So people will apply to be independent members of the Commission. The terms of reference will be worked on, but if there are any strong views you've got in relation to the points you've raised, please feel free to feed them in.
So are you saying that monuments will be considered for removal?
I don't see why they shouldn't be.
And how long is this Commission going to deliberate for?
Well, one of the things that we're going to do is for the Commission to work out a timeline. You'll be aware of the large amount of time that there needs to be, rightly so, in relation to formal consultations. Changing a street name is not straightforward, but also I'm well aware that a large number of streets in our city aren't under the control of City Hall. 95%, roughly speaking, are the controls of the boroughs. The boroughs, not unreasonably, will want to have consultations before they change street names or street squares, or English Heritage's process for Blue Plaque, for example, takes some time. So they have to work out a timeline in relation to any new statues being unveiled. From personal experience, for example, Millicent Fawcett took us about 18 months before she was finally unveiled as a new statue of Parliament Square. That's an example of a big statue in Parliament Square, really different to what could happen in squares and streets across our city.
And finally, Mr. Mayor, when the Commission makes recommendations, perhaps to boroughs, will those recommendations be effectively recommendations from the Mayor of London? Will you endorse their recommendations?
I should just distinguish. So the LGA have separately put out their guidance for local authorities because you'll be aware that local authorities are responsible for what happens on streets and space that are under the control of the local authority. We've got no power, nor would I think it's appropriate for us to force.
Mr. Mayor, that's not what I asked. Presumably the Commission is going to make recommendations. And those recommendations, will those recommendations effectively be from yourself as Mayor of London?
Well, it depends what they are.
So you will overrule recommendations that the Commission may make?
Your question was, will they have my approval? And so I'll have to wait and see once the Commission comes back with recommendations whether I approve them or not.
This Commission is semi-independent from the Mayor of London, and it is not about Mayor of London's decisions, it is about the Commission's.
Yeah, the best comparator at this stage is the fourth plinth. I'm not a judge in relation to the fourth plinth. And so there's a separate body of experts who come up with recommendations for what goes in the fourth plinth. That's been the case for some time. It's a really good system.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That's fine. You've answered the question.